Castle strikes fear in the heart of all email marketers. And I want to invite you to look past that. We only got regulated because we didn't do the right thing. I'm pretty certain the government wasn't sitting around wondering what law they could make up. Back in 2004, and Matt was on the original team that helped craft and design Castle, they could see a problem coming. They could see that we were doing what Min talked to earlier, where we were being indiscriminate. So they actually had to force, get this, folks, they had to force us to be nice to our customers and to consider our customers when we were email marketing. So I'm going to invite you to look at it like it's just the right thing to do. It's just the best practices. Forget about CASL compliance. Do the right thing for your customer and you'll be CASL compliant. Really that simple. They would want to, if you considered your customer, they would want to know who was sending them the email. They would want to have some form of consent or some relevance to why you're sending it to them, right? They would want no trickery in the subject lines. So it's just, think about the customer, you'll get it right. And you won't have to worry about CASL. So, Vesna is the head of circulation and the CASL expert for Annex business publications, and I asked Vesna here predominantly to address what it was like. They were one of the first that I met who truly implemented a CASL compliance system, and it was funny because during our setup for this, Vesna said, "These are things I wanted to do anyway, but I couldn't convince management. And then when the $10 million fines came along with CASL, I got management's attention." Right? So many ways to use these silly laws, but Vesna is going to address some of the issues, positive and negative, about what it's meant over this 3-year period or 4-year period now to be more compliant, what having consent has done to the quality of the lists, and I'm sure we're to some degree preaching to the choir, but we also want to take time to answer any specific questions around, there's some little things that have unfolded, like the Article 9 holding the ESPs and the ISPs accountable for people who are reaching CASL. How many are aware of that? Yeah, so that's been in the law from day one, but we didn't think CRTC was going to enforce it until this past year when they handed out the first fine for it. So we'll talk a little bit more about that too. So I'm going to give the mic to Vesna and allow her to address what it's been like these past 4 years.
That's a little bit. That's a loaded question. Thank you everyone for being here. As Derek mentioned, I'm Vesna Moore, and I'm the Director of Audience Development and the CASL Compliance Officer, not by choice, but the CASL Compliance Officer for Annex Business Media. So back almost 5 years ago now, when CASL first started coming around the scene, we were hearing about this new legislation, and we were kind of struggling for a number of months to try and figure out what it meant and what it meant for our business. We were lucky in the respect that we are a B2B company. We have about 65 magazine brands, and we have a readership audience of those magazine brands. And we have always been good players in the market as far as marketing is concerned and email tactics. We have been trying to be best of class even before CASL came around, but as Derek alluded to, we had a number of things that I really wanted to do that I knew were going to be a benefit to our audience, our customers. And the management teams at the time saw it as a nice to have and not a must have. So the use case wasn't really looked at in any really serious context, and the money that was associated with doing these things wasn't really provided at the time. So when CASL came around, we decided that we had to take it seriously, and we met with our lawyer, who was a very good lawyer. She was exceptionally good because she sought to understand what it meant to our business at the same time as looking at the legislation and how we could implement this with the minimal risk factors, but still continue our multi-million-dollar business every year of our email marketing campaigns and everything. So once we spent months arguing in boardrooms about what the legislation meant, and there was a lot of back and forth on a lot of the details of CASL and a lot of vagueness and what the interpretation was, we got to work on doing all of the requirements. So as an example, we spent about 4 months in deliberation and then about 2 to 3 months of actual programming and system development and specs and getting processes in place in order to be as compliant as we can be. So what that entailed is doing something that I had wanted from the very beginning, and that was what we call a customer preference center. As I mentioned, we have 65 brands. Of those 65 brands, they each have their own lists, and they each do their own newsletters. So we have about 120 newsletters that we send across our brands. Some of them are daily, some of them are twice a week, some of them are once a week. But because we're so large and we have so many brands, we use templates. So a lot of the newsletters can look similar, but no one knows who Annex Business Media is. They know the magazines and the brands. So we used to get people constantly calling in and saying that I've unsubscribed. We always had a working unsubscribe mechanism even before CASL, but they would say I've unsubscribed 3 times now, excuse me, from your newsletters, and yet I still continue to get them. Well, unknown to them, they were subscribed to 13 of our magazines, and they tried to unsubscribe, and they have unsubscribed successfully to 5 of those magazines, but they've got another 8 left before they can actually get off all of our lists. So we created a very dynamic and very pretty preference center that helps show our readers, regardless of the brand that they're receiving, everything that they get from us. And it also allows them to easily manage their preferences right to every level of the emails that they got. So if they want to be removed from third-party marketing, they can be removed from all the third-party marketing, or just from a specific brand. They can be removed from all newsletters, or they can be removed from all marketing, or everything our company does. Since we've implemented just that preference center, our customer service concerns have gone down dramatically. I don't even recall the last time we had someone email us or call in or complain about, not being able to get off our list or not being able to manage the list. So to their point, we're keeping our customers much happier by implementing some of the requirements of CASL. Some of the other things we've done is we've actually embraced CASL. We saw this as an opportunity to put ourselves ahead of some of our competitors in the marketplace and to put ourselves in a position where our lists and the clients that use our lists can see us as the forefront of compliance when it comes to CASL. Originally, when CASL came along, we had a lot of clients that dropped the Canadian component of their email marketing. They used to do email marketing with us, and they wanted all sorts of indemnity clauses to the point that we weren't comfortable providing that back to these clients. So, as a result, through the embracing of CASL, we tried to tell them how compliant we were, but that's just us talking. So we actually did the very first CASL compliance audit for the third party. We asked our auditing company who audits our magazines, they're called Alliance for Audited Media, AAM, if they would work with us to do a third party audit. And we went through a couple of months of processes, very stringent processes, a lot of system analysis and a lot of process analysis, and true end audit selection to determine that the processes are working properly. And in the end, we actually had certifications. So we're kind of one of the only media companies that we know of, still to this day, to have third-party CASL compliance certification. So we can now go to our clients and give them those certification papers and have them feel that they are working with a company that is extremely serious about CASL and has put in the money and the effort to do a third-party audit. And I think that's put us, above most of our competition. No one else can claim the same. So if you want to make sure you're not going to get that $10 million fine or that personal $1 million fine, you're probably better off working with a company that can really claim their compliance a lot more than some other companies. From a list perspective, We initially dropped anywhere from 5 to 10% of our list across any one brand when Castle first came into play because we just couldn't get any kind of consent for them. We knew they were not the right email addresses to be using once Castle was in place. All that did was create higher open rates and better engagement right across our brands. Those are the good parts of Castle. It's keeping our lists clean and keeping us honest with the marketing that we do with them. The difficult parts of Castle have been all the work, obviously, that had to go into it, and the resources and the money. We now have Castle marketing budget lines in order to keep our implied consent and have them come back prior to expiring that implied consent. So we are actually putting hundreds of thousands of dollars against our email marketing list to keep it clean and to keep it compliant. But we are making that money back on the use of that list and the marketing and the monetization of that list. And again, the complaints have just disappeared as far as unsubscribes and everything else. I think Castle is a good thing for our company and for most industries in general. It's been a struggle, but if you can do it, it will be a benefit to your company, I believe.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think that's the challenge. You can probably turn that down just a bit, just a little too high. I think the challenge with all of these new laws, including GDPR, is to exactly that, is to look for the opportunity in it. And Vesna and her team have seen it as a competitive advantage to them. And I think from a marketing point of view, it's a very smart way to look at it. Yes, it's been worked, and it's been work that even worse is created by the government. It's like we want to get mad about it, but the fact is we're in this soup because of what we did collectively as a business community with email. My belief is that the mass marketing mentality that we came from really filtered into digital marketing. And we came at it that more is better. And about the email, it was all about the size of the list. And we learned by doing that the size of the list is the least important thing. The engagement of the list is really what we're after. And we never had to worry about that in mass marketing. We didn't worry about engagement. That wasn't even a conversation. It is the core of the conversation for email marketing. So I love the approach. I too am on the side of, I think Castle is amazing. I think I'm a little disappointed that we needed to be told how to treat our customers well, but we did. And I think it's going to save email as a business tool. I really do. GDPR, the e-privacy law in Europe, there's new legislation coming in the US. I don't know if anybody's been following, but the California law has triggered the feds to draft their own. So there are 2 different laws being drafted and to be put in front of Congress as early as this month in order to get a federal GDPR-like law of what you can and can't do with data. And again, we abused it. We had companies like Cambridge Analytica, using our own data to manipulate us. And that wasn't the intent of us giving up our data. And now we need to be regulated on it. So that's a good segue to the GDPR e-privacy side. So, there's been a lot of press about GDPR. It is very broad and very deep. There's lots of tunnels you can go down with GDPR to be, squeaky clean. But if fundamentally you do the right thing and you inform, you're going to stay out of trouble. So if you do the privacy by design, you're going to stay out of trouble with GDPR. And the disturbing part for me is the next shoe, the e-privacy law, which is going through Parliament right now in the EU. That's the one that's going to really cramp our style as marketers, and in particular as email marketers. because the conversation as it sits now is going to fall on the side of consent. So there's going to be very minimal implied consent. It's going to be clear, freely given consent. So I'm going to let Katherine talk a little bit more about kind of where they've gotten to. We've been following it. We've read the 260-page proposed document twice. Thank God for the president of Romania who just put out a summary. It's only 80 pages. So, over to you, Katherine.
I haven't even got through all of that.
I know,
So,
I know.
my name is Katherine Breeson, and I'm a senior consultant with Newport, Thomson. My background is in marketing and publishing, and just to kind of reiterate what Derek said is, at some point in time, when digital came on board, we became, just by default, I think, a little bit less customer focused. So we decided to tell our customers and just send the messages regardless of whether they were asking for them or not. And that's where these new laws come in. For those who aren't completely familiar with GDPR and PECR, which is going to become EPR, there's a lot of acronyms in all of these. It's very similar to, in terms of the Canadian law, we've got PIPEDA, and then we have CASL. And CASL sits alongside PIPEDA and deals strictly with electronic communications. And that's what's happening in the EU right now. So GDPR is the law that protects data and deals with privacy and data protection, whereas PECR, which is Personal Electronic Communications Regulation, deals specifically with electronic communications and the communications of privacy to individuals in the EU. It's already been there. So this isn't a new law, but it is in flux and it is changing. And it's been ongoing, and they're hoping to have the new regulation in place. They were hoping to have it in place in time with the European elections. That's not going to be the case. There's been a lot of arguments and a lot of kind of back and forth about the language between it, because GDPR itself, as it deals with the data protection, you have to make sure that this new e-privacy that's going to sit alongside it coincides and they don't conflict with each other and they complement each other. The bottom line is similar to CASL and PIPEDA, is when it comes down to it, the privacy side of it, the e-privacy will trump anything that GDPR has to say if there is any conflict with that. So e-privacy deals specifically with electronic communications. In CASL, electronic communications refers to mostly email marketing, SMS, text messaging, and direct one-on-one through social media. Whereas with the e-privacy in Europe, it also includes, unlike Canada, it also includes telephone marketing, it includes fax as well, whereas we don't have to deal with those things here. The overall premise behind this is, again, it's putting the customer first. Putting customer first is the primary. Second is being respectful of the private individual, and then being accountable and being transparent. And so that's where, regardless of how things fall out with the wording of the laws, and like Derek said, we're dealing with hundreds and hundreds of pages, and that's been my role, is chasing the law for the past few years. As long as you err on the side of caution and really think and be customer-centric and focused and privacy by design, putting them first where things start from the beginning, you should be okay. Now, the laws, CASL pertains to emails sent to in Canada, citizens in Canada, and the EU and GDPR, it applies to anybody who is a citizen of the European Union. So even if you have customers that are there, or if you have staff that are living here but are still EU citizens, these laws still apply to them. And so it's important to know that it's not necessarily where things are coming from, but it's who they're going to. And that's probably the most important. I could go into reciting laws at this point, but I'm not going to do that. But it really comes down to the individual rights There's a little bit more lax when it comes to B2B, but not much. Really, it's very similar if you're familiar with Castle for the most part. You have to, it's going to be consent-based. The opt-in, the soft opt-in, which would be considered implied consent here, is really, you're able to market and communicate with existing customers, and there's a time limit on it. We don't have the specific times yet, but the implication is that you're probably going to have to renew consent with people every 2 years because roles change and people move and email addresses change and things like that. And whereas, here with Castle, if you have express consent, you're considered to have express consent basically permanently. You don't have to re-up that. Whereas in the EU, you're going to have to renew that every couple of years. So it's more important than ever to have those systems in place where you're going to be able to track that and be able to monitor it and change it easily moving forward across all of your lists.
Just by way of show of hands, how many people actually use a preference center, as Vesna alluded to? That's good. That's good. From what I've seen, absolutely the 5-star way to manage consent and consumer preference. That if you can plug your preference center into all your systems so it informs on a real-time basis, that is the way to go. We're starting to see the rise of, we just formed a partnership with a group in the UK called Cineris, and they have a very powerful preference center that does exactly that. It plugs into all your systems so it informs. If you go in and change your preferences today, the systems are updated immediately. I think that, given the proof that we're required and the empowerment of the consumer that is required, I think the preference center is an absolute must in a record-keeping and consent-based marketplace. So thank you, Katherine. We've got some particular expertise in the front of the room here regarding these laws and data protection and privacy as a whole. So if there's any questions from you guys, we'd love to try to give you the best shot at a straight answer. One of the things that had me write the book on Castle, my book is called What Marketers Need to Know When Emailing Canadians. It was born out of watching the lawyers the first year of enforcement for under Castle. The U.S. marketers were saying, I'm really busy, tell me what to do. And the lawyers would tell you what you couldn't do, and then point you to the law. And there aren't many marketers that want to read the law. And very early as president of DMAC, I felt that we should be giving better guidance on this. So we read the law thoroughly, we read all the guidance documents, and we started to make statements. And I remember the lawyers, when I first wrote the book, the lawyers going, "Oh, you're taking an awful big chance, aren't you?" No. I'm just answering the question that every marketer is asking is, what do I need to do, right? Because at the end of the day, Castle was one of 20 things on your priority list, and you were willing to do it, but you needed to know what it is. And I just find it's kind of ironic, because when the private right of action got suspended indefinitely, the concern about Castle compliance kind of went away. Did you guys notice that too? In June 2017, when the minister suspended the private right of action, that was going to be the main enforcement tool. That's the one we were all worried about. If the consumer starts coming after us when we spam them, now we're in the hopper. We got a better shot at winning a lottery, and I told Mr. Baines this face to face. You got a better shot at winning a lottery than you do getting fined by under Castle by CRTC. They're a group of a small band, and they can only do so much. They're trying to enforce a law globally. They're trying to do memos of understanding with other countries. They're trying to set precedents to know what they're looking for and what they're gonna levy and hand out violations for. And if you look at their first 3 years, the first 3 years of enforcement, it was actually masterful what they did. The first 18 months, they handed out a few sample fines so that we could kind of go, oh, I see. You're looking for unsubscribe, working unsubscribes, and you're looking for consent. Those are the two things you're focused on. Then all the guidance came out in that 18-month period. Their attention turned about halfway through that 3-year period to they are now negotiating memos of understanding with a variety of countries, and I think there's 12 to 15 of them now. And they were waiting for the right of action. So when it got suspended, it just, it's like the air was let out of a balloon. And most of us felt if we're not compliant now, we've got time. It actually, we don't. Because I think if you look at it from the consumer's point of view, we're well past time. The consumers are now starting to expect us to treat them properly and to respect and to provide that working unsubscribe. So we've got 10 minutes left for questions, and we'd like to turn it over to you guys. Any question? Yeah.
I have two. So you mentioned that the preference sector is a really good way. I'm just curious to understand how do you balance what to include and what to exclude the preference sector, being what we're complying to now versus kind of looking into the future. So that's my first question. The second question is you mentioned the list dropped, right? I'm not sure. How do you kind of manage that culture change in the organization?
Okay, to the first question, in order to kind of analyze what your preferences and the requirements are going to be, you need to obviously understand your products and the type of products that you're sending out digitally, and then trying to determine, do I have cross-pollination potentially across my brands or across my lines of business? Am I marketing different products? And the CASL requirements are that you have to be able to allow someone to be removed from the piece that they just received. So when they click on unsubscribe from the email piece that was just sent to them, they need to be able to be removed from what you just sent them within 2 clicks. You can't make it onerous for them. The other requirement within CASL is you have to allow someone to be removed from all your email address, all your email sending in the future as well. So in order to do your preference center, you have to understand what your makeup is of your products that you send out digitally and the audiences that might cross over those products. We found it easier with so many products just to have a global preference center across every single thing we do. If you look at my account, because I subscribe myself to everything, my profile scrolls and scrolls and scrolls and scrolls and scrolls. But it gives me full functionality and full flexibility, and it also is savvy enough that if we create a new product tomorrow, and we do often, new newsletters are coming up, on a regular basis, it seems, it just happens within the preference center. I don't need programming, I don't need anything. Our systems talk to each other, as you were mentioning, Derek. You have to have your preference center update your consolidated database applications or wherever that consent and that management of consent is there. It's real time. And so when you want to subscribe for something, the moment you do it, you're actually a subscriber of our backend systems as well. So that's kind of my answer to the first question.
Can I add something to
yes.
that? Sorry to interrupt. I think it's just important too, the other thing that needs to be taken into consideration with the preference center and the unsubscribes is how you change your collection methods. And that's really where things start. Is, in a lot of cases, such as Annex meeting, you would sign up for one thing, you would be signing up for the global brand. So for instance, if anybody's ever shopped with Old Navy, you may, this is my favorite example, you all of a sudden end up on a list with the Gap and with Banana Republic and with, every other brand that's underneath, and you're getting 1 million emails, but you only subscribe to one. So I think it's really important to go from the beginning of the process to the end. When you set up your collection, are you signing up for emails from the parent company? Are you signing up with a particular brand? Are you signing up for, maybe if it's a special interest group, a publishing company and there's an automotive, you can sign up to all the automotive because you're within that industry, or you can sign up to all the marketing initiatives and so on. But like Vesna said, you have to make it as easy for the person to unsubscribe as they did to sign up. But it's really important to also have those preferences at the collection point as it is at the unsubscribe point.
Absolutely correct, yeah. And to the second question, how did we kind of manage, dealing internally with the dropping of the list? I think it's one of those situations where we knew Castle was coming around for a long time, and we were working towards it, and we knew that we were going to have some lists that were going to go down. Some were going to be bigger than others. And it's almost like we overstated what we believed might be the lists that are going to drop. Castle was a big deal, everybody was hearing about it, so, it was legislation, there was no question about what we can and can't do, it was very clear. And I think with, we have a number of publishers, each magazine has their own publishers, and they've been in the market for, 30, 40 years, and they were quite concerned about where the lists were, and I held off telling them what their final numbers would be, almost to the very end, to July deadline, and they were substantially lower than what was anticipated just because of the business practices that we had in place prior to that. So I think a lot of people were anticipating hearing that we were going to lose, 10, 12, 2, 3,000, and they were 500, 200, 150, because we did a lot of work with trying to get whatever consent we could as well, and we had marketing in place.
With a lot of our clients, when it came time for staff training, we used Castle. We said, you don't want to be that guy, the one that gets the boss fined for $250,000. You don't want to be that guy. And all of a sudden, we had the whole room's attention. So there's times when you can actually use Castle as like a really handy little weapon, and getting it in the culture would be that would be one way, is to actually use the possibility of the boss getting fined, and point out to the staff that yes, they can actually if the boss is involved in the decision, he can actually be fined personally, or she. That usually gets the staff's attention. We've done a ton of staff training around Castle, and that is one of the things we use the law that way. So it's here I am encouraging you to look at it from the consumer's point of view and all that, but there is a time when you can actually use the law like a hammer. Any other questions? Yeah.
So I live and work in Europe, and I wanted to understand better from a Canadian perspective how aware are Canadian senders of GDPR sending, if you're a global brand in Canada, for example, how aware are senders of European laws to understand the rights of the customer? So from our point of view, it's you're still receiving a lot of emails from around the world that are not compliant with our laws, and I wanted to better understand the adoption rate of that and the understanding from a Canadian perspective.
Yeah, I sit on the Canadian Advisory Council for GDPR, and it's exactly for this reason, is that we're trying to summarize GDPR for Canadian organizations, saying this is what you should know about GDPR, because we're painfully aware that the awareness of GDPR and how it applies to your company is pretty low. How many people think here, and this should represent a pretty good the positive end of the market for understanding it. How many people here truly understand GDPR and what you can and can't do regarding email marketing? So it's not bad in this crowd, because this is part of what we do for a living. But I think if you ask that same question of a general marketing group, you're not going to get that many hands. So the problem, in my opinion, with GDPR is you have very good sources. So the stuff that the DPAs are putting out, the official guidance, we only pay attention to the law, the official guidance, and the fines. Those are the only documents that matter, because everything else is entertainment. I call it GDPR entertainment. Every day there's dozens of articles about GDPR, but they're just somebody's opinion about it, rather than unofficial document. So we make it clear to our clients that we hardly even entertain that stuff. Occasionally, a well-written article will find its way onto Blazon, but for the most part, we try to stick to the official guidance. And it's a difficult one to grasp because the GDPR does not come very far into the communication area. It touches on it, it bumps up against it, but the real shoe that's going to drop is the privacy law. That regulates fax marketing, guys. There's actually a section in the privacy law about fax marketing. And phone, yeah. And the direct mail. If you're going to send a direct mail in the UK or in Europe, you have to scrub it against the do not mail list. And if you don't do that, you could be fined. Right? We're not that tough here. We're pretty free to direct mail. You know, it's kind of like if you got them, smoke them, right? All right. Good night.
Final words of advice from the panel?
Final words?
Final words of advice from the panel?
Yep. So, if you had one piece of advice, Vesna, what would it be?
Use Castle to your advantage.
Very good. I love it.
I can steal one from you. More is not better, better is better.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, it's just take care of your customer. Take care of your customer. That's what all these laws are about. So,
We'll just switch to.
yeah, great. So we're going to just take a couple minutes to swap out PowerPoints and introduce the next panel.